So, hi everyone. My name is Lauren Lee Tran, and I am one of the student ambassadors here for the College of Business. Today, I have with me Joanne Smith for our Orfalea Chat today. Joanne Smith is Executive Vice President and Chief People Officer for Delta Airlines. She's responsible for preserving the airline's unique culture of positive engagement with its more than 80,000 employees. We are so fortunate to have her on the Orfalea College of Business Team's Advisory Council and here with us today. So I'm pleased to welcome Joanne Smith to our Orfalea Chat session today.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you. Well, Joanne, I want to go ahead and dive in. And as an alumni, I think it's kind of looking back on your time at Cal Poly. I'd love to kind of start off with what did you do, or perhaps wish you did, to set yourself up for success early in your career?
So it's so long ago since graduating from Cal Poly, but you look back on what were the things that kind of set you up for success. Certainly Cal Poly is number one out there, and just the learn by doing, the taking advantage of opportunities, leaving college and ready to work. And I worked in college, and so I was kind of working and going to school part-time and working full-time. But I just think there's just a great work ethic that is taught to you at Cal Poly. And there's some grit that when you come out of Cal Poly, and what I've seen in other college graduates now that I have the opportunity, in HR at Delta, to see what makes successful people in the workplace. I mean, there's grit, and some schools have it, and some schools really don't teach it as well.
Something that about grit is kind of learning from your mistakes, learning from perceived failures, and finding lessons of that. And I'm curious if you could describe a time where you've made a mistake or quote unquote failure in your career, and what's the best lesson you've learned through that experience?
So many mistakes. I think it's just the openness of, and willingness to admit your mistakes. Maybe it's Cal Poly, but maybe it's just your upbringing that teaches you to just lean into your mistakes and learn from them instead of being afraid of them. You learn I learned something about myself. Even after 40 years, I'm still learning by myself, just to say, you kind of have to just bide your time a little bit and not jump to the first instinct or the thing that you want so bad, because it might not be the right thing to do. So anyway, that's a lesson I've learned.
I'm curious as well, like when you first stepped into Delta, it's a large organization, and kind of going into that management position at a large company, what surprised you, and how did you navigate such a large organization?
So my first entrance into Delta was really in a very small subsidiary named Song. And, after the 3 years at Song, then I kind of got, embedded into Delta. So it was sort of a nice little entry to me. I didn't have to kind of come in fully like a little fish in a big pond. So that was nice for me. But, what you learn in a big company is the resources. I mean, things don't move as fast as you want them to versus a small company. So if you're looking at whether you'd fit better into a large company, or what would you fit better into a small company? I mean, I have this conversation all the time with people that come to Delta that might have come from little companies, is that yes, it's a little frustrating that the speed of change doesn't happen as fast, but the richness of the resources and what's available to you to get to a better answer. And that's sort of the kind of pros and cons.
As the world has realized racial injustice that's persisted, I know the CEO of Delta had announced the efforts to become more just, equal, anti-racist company, and much of that exists within HR. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think HR leaders and aspiring HR leaders need to do to create more equitable and inclusive workplaces?
It's for a number of years we have been on this journey of seeking diversity, promoting inclusion, and driving accountability for our DE&I strategy. And I think, in the inclusion piece of that is very, very important, especially now. This, awakening that I think we've all had in the last few months to, the privilege that we've had all of our lives, and being in Atlanta, where you looked around and our leadership didn't look like our communities. We didn't have enough Black leaders in senior positions. So, we've kind of faced that head on, and HR is kind of driving a lot of that work with leaders to make sure that we are finding opportunities for our Black colleagues to advance. But beyond that, it's really this inclusion piece of it, this let's talk about it. A lot of of our business resource groups have been hosting their own forums to, again, bring your whole self to work and talk about what's preventing you from doing that within your environment. So we've been on this journey for a number of years with an eye towards inclusion of all, right? It's not one group or the other, whether it's our military, our veterans group, our working families group, our Latin business resource group, our Pacific Asian group. I mean, we have a lot of diversity at Delta already, and I think it's this emphasis recently on let's make sure that the workplace is a good place for all is just going to continue to get stronger and stronger as we move forward. But back to what I started with, I mean, we have a specific issue that we're trying to solve with Black leadership, and trying to advance that and double the number of our Black officers over the next 5 years.
I'm curious as to, for your mentors, your allies, what's the best lesson that they have taught you that has maybe been influential in your career?
Well, I can remember the boss that hired me to Delta. When he left, he was president of Song, and I was the vice president of marketing and customer service, and he left, retired prior, I think it's 2004, said, you should take this job. And I said, I'm not prepared for that job, right? Well, you really are, because if you don't take it, we're going to give it to, Joe. Let's just call Joe. And I said, well, I think I'm better than Joe. So that's just, taking the best advice I've received is, taking that next step and not being afraid of it. And back to don't be afraid to make mistakes, because we all make them. And that was a good lesson. And I still hear that on my biggest allies here on the team tells me that all the time, is that you don't give yourself enough credit when you should. And so I think we all need to just, in our Cal Poly humility, because I do think Cal Poly is just a humble school, right? If you want to work hard, back to that grit, we tend to be workhorses. And I like that about myself, as I work hard, but sometimes you got to be a show horse, right? And you have to, that's what my good buddy here is telling me all the time, is just to, don't be afraid to be proud of the work you're doing.
Well, I do want to ask kind of one last question as well. We talked about how there's impacts of COVID. There's a lot of unknown in the world that we're living in today. And for students currently looking for jobs or internships, what advice would you give them in kind of navigating this kind of unknown and unprecedented time?
Well, there are a lot of companies that are hiring, right? So it's, when I think about the time I graduated from Cal Poly, it was, highest unemployment rate that we had seen in, decades. And so it was a bad time coming out. But you could say that right now but there's a lot of really great opportunity. The healthcare space, certainly technology, digital, there's a lot of exciting things that are happening. So, being open to something that you might not have been open to before, I think is helpful. And also just relax. I mean, I think we'll look back on these times and wish that we would have just chilled out a little bit more, and appreciated a bit of the slowness too, of taking advantage of things that I promise you are not going to be the same 10 years from now. I think that, the world's going to get started again. The economy's going to get started again. Jobs are going to start again. So I think just taking a moment not to pressure yourself would be good advice.